Welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is The Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Let's start about our governor here in Pennsylvania, Tom Wolf. The report is that our governor has tested positive for the coronavirus. And look, all the right-wing nitwits and the anti-maskers are gleeful with joy, all tingly in the panties and happy as they can be that our governor, who has been pushing for people to wear masks, social distancing, and washing of the hands and all of that stuff, rightly so, has now come down with the virus. He says he's doing fine, doesn't have any real symptoms. He is quarantining from home. And I wish him the best, as I hope everyone is. But this, again, as he said in his statement, this goes to show that no matter what you do, you still can be vulnerable to it, which is why you need to be diligent, why you need to do the smart stuff. He said, as this virus rages, my positive test is a reminder that no one is immune from COVID, that following all precautions as I have done is not a guarantee, but it is what we know to be vital to stopping the spread of the disease. And so I ask all Pennsylvanians to wear a mask, stay home as much as possible, socially distance yourself from those not in your household, and most of all, take care of each other and stay safe. I wish you the best, Governor, a speedy recovery. But this is one of these moments where it is raging, and it's raging out of control. In fact, I just found out that a relative of mine has passed from COVID. He was of advanced age, in a nursing home, and was, last I knew, he was in reasonable health. He got this over. And the weird thing about it is he was a huge Trump supporter. He was somebody who, probably his dying words were, it's still a hoax. So my hope is, my thoughts, that at some point maybe we have a come together moment where this can be no longer political, no longer about who you voted for, no matter who you were for or against, but that we get through this. And it's going to be a couple of months. Once the vaccine is out, and hopefully everyone takes it, I will be when my turn comes, I will be sure to get the vaccine. And I'm somebody who does none of that. I've taken one flu shot in my life, and I was miserable. But this is one of those moments that we need to get to that herd immunity to get this under control so that we can have normal lives over the summer. I keep telling the kids, maybe the summertime, maybe next summer, the life you remember, the things we were able to do, going to concerts and going to ball games and all of that stuff, maybe that comes back. But we've got to be smart right now. We got to make it through these next couple of months, and we got to do smart things. And look, come January 20th, 2021, we have a new president, new vision, new leadership, smart leadership, and maybe we get through this. But here's the thing, while I feel assured that January 20th, 2021, we will have a new president putting his hand on the Bible and swearing to the Constitution, to uphold and defend the Constitution. We still have the Trump tantrum tour raging on all cylinders. In fact, you've got, and we talked about this on Monday, the Attorney General in Texas, who has seen it fit for him to file a lawsuit, not about what's going on in Texas. No, nothing's wrong in Texas, except the virus is raging completely out of control there. But never mind, nothing wrong in Texas. He's going to worry about Georgia, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. Evidently, everything was perfect in Texas for the voting, but it's those other four states that evidently somehow he, through mental telepathy or whatever, has figured out that there was fraud, massive fraud. So the Texas Attorney General has filed a lawsuit, and 16 other states have joined him. 16 other states that are not Georgia, Michigan, Pennsylvania, or Wisconsin, mind you, But 17 states in total have decided that they're going to go to the Supreme Court and try and overturn the votes of states that are not theirs. Which, when I first heard of this, I'm going, is that possible? I'm not a lawyer. I don't pretend to be one. But, I do know enough that you have to have some standing. And you got to wonder, what standing does Texas have in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Georgia, or Michigan? And I would argue the answer is none. If the attorney generals in those states are not filing suit, and their Supreme Courts have already said there's nothing to see, there's nothing here, evidently the attorney general in Texas believes otherwise. And these other 16 states, of which you've got Alabama, no surprise, Arkansas, Florida, Indiana, Kansas, as if there's not enough problems there, Louisiana, Mississippi, Montana, Nebraska, North Dakota, Oklahoma, South Carolina, South Dakota, Tennessee, Utah, and West Virginia. And as someone pointed out, of those states, 7 of them are the bottom 7 in education. And then there are, I guess, a gap, and then the rest of them are the bottom of the education spectrum in the country. And I'm not trying to make any disparaging comments about them. It just is what is. And I found that I agreed with the senator from Texas, John Cornyn, a Republican who at one point was the state's attorney general, I guess before his 2002 election. He said, why would a state, even such a great state as Texas, have a say-so on how another state administers their elections? And I agree with him. He says, it's an interesting theory, but I'm not convinced. So we'll see what our Supreme Court says. They have until Thursday to file their suit, and the Supreme Court will either take it or not. This is one of those things where I got to think that the Supreme Court has to come out and say something definitive. Something like, sit down and shut up. Something like, we've got to smack you with some kind of frivolous penalties. I know in state Supreme Courts and I know in state courts, there are penalties for bringing frivolous lawsuits. There are penalties for bringing knowingly bad suits. Now, Texas Senator Ted Cruz said he would be more than happy to argue that case. I'm all in favor of that. I'm all in favor of seeing him go down in flames. But here's the thing, and this is where I think where I'm at in Pennsylvania, I think our new Senate Majority Leader, Kim Ward, really let the cat out of the bag. The reason all of these Republicans are doing what they're doing, it's not because they're patriots, not because they think there was real election fraud, not because they're loyal to Donald Trump, but because they're cowards. It's that simple. She said that if she didn't go along with the signing of the document, 64 Pennsylvania Republicans signed onto a letter saying that they wanted the congressional delegation here in Pennsylvania to vote against certifying the election. And in an interview with the New York Times, she said she wouldn't have openly stated that she didn't want to sign with her colleagues, because in her words, if I would say to you, I don't want to do it, I'd get my house bombed tonight. These people, they're not patriots. They're not standing up for anything. They're cowering in the face of these MAGA hat wearing lunatics who we've allowed to rage and to throw temper tantrums and to kick and scream and complain for way too long. Will the adults in the room, will the adults in the Republican Party please stand up? Will the people with half a brain save your party? Save the nation? Because look, civil war was trending on Twitter today. And it wasn't talking about Syria. It wasn't talking about some far off place that nobody can find on a map. It was talking about right here. You have 17 states who have now joined together. And, part of me goes, can we just let them go? Is there a way to just go, you know what? Yeah, go ahead. You don't contribute to the country as a whole anyway. You end up taking far more tax dollars out of Washington than you contribute. You're a drain on the rest of us. Just go. There's part of me that really wants to say that, but here's the thing. I know people in many of those states. I know good, decent, honest, hardworking people who are stuck with these kind of leaders. So at some point, there's got to be some bit of sanity. I mean, are we heading towards the next civil war? I mean, I know some of my gun nut friends, I affectionately call amosexuals. I know they want a shooting war. They really do. They love the idea of it. Now, that's because they think that nobody's going to shoot back, which is interesting to me. Because what the new tactic is for these geniuses is they show up at an elected official's house, armed with their pajamas on and their costumes, and they display themselves like peacocks walking around with their guns. And this is all an intimidation thing. It's all to scare the person in the house. There's part of me that goes, if a window just opened, and all of a sudden you've got 5 other people aiming guns at them, what do? And is it going to take that? I in no way, shape, or form want that, but is that what it's going to take? And when is law enforcement going to go, wait a second, this is a major violation of public safety? When is it we're going to wake up and go, probably not a great idea to have a whole bunch of amped up, whining crybabies walking around with guns? Just kind of throwing that out there as a thought. I really fear for the next several months, and really the next couple of years, because the Republican Party clearly is not the party that they once were. This is not the party of Lincoln. It's not the party of Eisenhower. It's not the party of Ronald Reagan. This is now fully the party of Donald Trump. For all of the tantrum, all of the narcissism, all of the egotism, all of the the hooray for me and the hell with anybody else mentality, and the bloviating, the chest thumping. That's not what makes us great. It's not what makes us exceptional. Because you can scream louder or you can be the bully. As my grandfather always said, no matter how big and bad you think you are, always somebody bigger and badder. And that's the sad thing. We can no longer have conversation. We can no longer, it seems, we can no longer have elections. I sit here and I think about where we're heading. And it's not good times. Because all of this on January 20th, 2021 doesn't just go away. They are going to continue to make life very difficult for the people who just want to make this country better. And understand, while we're having this spasm and this tantrum, we're not solving our climate problems. We're not solving our economic problems. We're not solving our infrastructure problems. We're not solving our trade problems. We're not dealing with hunger or homelessness, or tick down the list of all the problems that average everyday working people are facing. We're not dealing with any of that stuff. Our government is now officially broken. The Republicans have finally gotten their way. Government does not work. And on January 20th, 2021, if Democrats don't get the 2 seats in Georgia, it's going to continue to not work, because they will obstruct, they will delay, they will make sure things are gridlocked and nothing gets done. And while that happens, there will be Americans who go to bed hungry. There will be unemployed Americans who don't get the help that they need, and they will become homeless Americans. This isn't me trying to be hyperbolic. This is reality. And I just want a couple of Republicans to step forth and say this is enough. Now, there have been a couple of voices. I give Pat Toomey credit, don't like him. But in this vein, I kind of give him credit. Now, understand, he's not running for anything ever again. He's already said not going to run for re-election, not going to run for governor. So, like Jeff Flake, he can say whatever he wants now because it doesn't really matter. But where are the patriots? Where are the statesmen? Where are the people who are going to speak out and tell the loudest, the bullies, to sit down and shut up? We've seen the evidence. There is none. We've seen what they have presented. There's nothing there. Sorry, not even Rudy Giuliani can make a cogent argument for what he's trying to make an argument for. If you've watched his little kangaroo courts, if you've watched the political theater that they attempted to rile us up with, there was nothing there. And look, I'm someone who says, we have some problems with our electoral system. We have some things we absolutely need to do, and we need to do quickly. I agree. There are things without question. But sorry, Rudy, you lost me. And the reality is, I think you lost most of the country. Now, the question becomes, which way do we go as a nation? Is this a moment in history where we look at the loud fringe and we push back? We stand up and say no more? Or is this a moment where we cower and we recess into the darkness and allow them to dominate the light? They've got nothing. There's nothing there. The Supreme Court isn't going to save them. The state's Supreme Courts are not going to save them. All they can do at this point is do exactly what they claim has been done to them, and that is steal an election. That's all they've got. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back.
There's nothing more American than workers standing up, and the union gives a voice to win. On the Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1958. That was the day 12 ultra-conservatives, including Robert Welch, Fred Koch, and Harry Lynn Bradley, gathered in Indianapolis to found the John Birch Society. These men saw cabals and communist conspiracies everywhere. They mobilized their vast financial resources to fuel Cold War paranoia. They opposed New Deal policies, the Civil Rights Movement, Lyndon Johnson's Great Society programs, and the Equal Rights Amendment. They funded Barry Goldwater's presidential bid in 1964, denounced Richard Nixon as a fake, and warned of his establishment of diplomatic ties with China. The Birchers also opposed water fluoridation, the Environmental Protection Agency, and the Occupational Safety and Health Administration. They pressed for the U.S. to withdraw from the United Nations and viewed the U.S. war in Vietnam as a plot to bring communism to the United States. Welch, a candy manufacturer, even asserted that President Dwight David Eisenhower was simply a tool for the communists and an advocate of a one-world new order. More recently, many Birchers have also helped to found and fund the National Right to Work Committee, whose legal defense arm has pushed hard for anti-union legislation. Prominent members like the Koch brothers have funneled millions into the National Right to Work Committee in order to bust unions, kill the Employee Free Choice Act, and weaken the regulatory authority of the National Labor Relations Board. Their current headquarters are in Appleton, Wisconsin, hometown of Red Scare warrior Senator Joseph McCarthy.
Well, I run down most hurriedly and joined the John Birch Society. Got me a secret membership card, started walking off down the road. Oh boy, I'm a real John Bircher now. Look out, you're
Labor
coming.
History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So Russian state media, evidently they have a I guess a show like our 60 Minutes. It's one of their big news talk shows. Evidently, the person who is the big name there brought up the possibility that Donald Trump could come to Russia, seek asylum in Russia, because they believe that he's gonna have some problems post presidency. I find it interesting that they keep referring to him as our Donald and Comrade Trump. I find it interesting. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on Comrade Trump and all of the nonsense that's going on, plus the big news today on Facebook. I've asked our good friend Justin Hendricks to come talk with us. Justin's a volunteer organizer with the Project Protect the Results Coalition. Justin, thanks for taking time for us.
Having me, Rick.
I'm looking at this and I'm going, is Russia a good place for Trump at the end of this? He might actually get his hotel.
He seems to like the warmer climate of Florida, so I don't know how he'd get on in the dacha. How that'd go on for him. But yeah, send him. That sounds like a good idea.
Sounds like a great idea.
Yeah.
But real quick, you were one of the guys who at the beginning were saying, look, this is going to be a rough couple of months. He's not going to go quietly. Your organization was out there saying, hey, we got to prepare for this. And well, sadly, you were right.
Well, we were right on one level, which was that the transition was going to be a difficult one, and that Donald Trump was never going to do the right thing, and that seemed like something that was very obvious to bet on. But I have to say, on the worst case scenarios, luckily, Joe Biden won a very compelling victory. And, with the certification having just occurred yesterday, now 306 electoral college votes, headed to that final meeting on December 14th. There's no real risk that the election outcome is in jeopardy. It's a very, very low risk at this point. And yet you still see this kind of complete secession from reality among the Republicans and among the right. In this kind of continued campaign to try to argue that the election was stolen or that it was illegitimate. And it's now starting to bear out in the opinion polls, which was probably the most unfortunate thing to see. There were two polls today, one from a Civics, the other one was an NPR Marist poll, and both had at around 60% the number of American voters who regard the outcome of the election as fair and legitimate. That's not a high number. And I understand like being, a spoiled sport or being really upset that your candidate didn't win. But that just sort of deep disillusionment and sense that the whole thing was rigged. Trump won the message war. That's cut through.
No, you're absolutely right. And what's interesting to me is Trump lost by 7 million votes. Only in this fantasy island world that they live in does losing by 7 million votes equate to a win.
Absolutely, and that's the reality. We've got to figure out how to move forward now, and I feel like to some extent, a lot of people are kind of like wondering like, well, what should we do? You had some academics this week arguing, should we still be concerned about whether this is a coup? Is it a slow motion coup? What is the long-term damage to democracy? And clearly, it's a real problem that they're behaving this way. But what do we do about it? No,
and that's the question. Because I think a big part of what we're seeing in these opinion polls and Trump's ability to really swing popular opinion is social media. And while he's screaming about 230 and all of the stuff there, it's the power of social media that has given him and all the people who have tried to push him this kind of messaging, which is why I'm glad to see, and this is bipartisan, I'm glad to see finally someone going after Facebook and saying, look, you're too big. This has got to be broken up somehow. There's got to be some bit of competition in the social media world.
Yeah, absolutely. And we can pivot over to talking about that. But, I will just say, though, that, with this 1 week left until the Electoral College meets and then, eventually kind of getting on to the new Congress and the sort of, vote on to receive the vote on the House floor, there's still some nonsense that the Republicans are going to try to work through. These 17 states that have, in my view, shamefully gone along with this Texas Attorney General, plot to try to overturn the election. This stuff's going to resound. It's going to reverberate through American politics for years. And I hope that the Biden administration can do some positive things and offer a counter narrative and a counter example of what it means to govern and do some great things in people's lives, because it seems to me that's the only way we're going to get past this. Is people are just going to have to see an alternative to all this division and strife and an argument that the whole thing's rigged.
Do you think it's possible? I mean, because I see, Trump and the rest of them coming out, and just from day one, Mitch McConnell, like he did with Obama, saying we're going to make him a one-term president. I just see, the level of whine, ramping up on January 20th, and through the first 100 days at least.
The kind of outlines of the Biden is illegitimate narrative are already there. There was a new front opened up again against Hunter Biden today. So it's this kind of continued just carnival of lies, that will kind of just continue to go. And my hope is that we can see a go through, and a lot of that, of course, depends on January 5th, what's going to happen in Georgia. If the Dems end up with the Senate as well, then things are very different. And I think people will actually look at Biden's victory very differently if Georgia goes right for the Democrats. They'll probably regard it as a much more important and resounding win even than we do now.
Yeah, and maybe you can actually get some things done. Because my fear is we end up with maybe one or none of the senators from Georgia winning for the Democrats, and then we end up having Mitch McConnell doing what he's done for the last couple of years, which is, well, nothing.
Yeah, I mean, that guy's the worst.
I mean, the fact that in the middle of a pandemic, we can't get a relief bill pushed through, a stimulus bill pushed through to help people to stay home and protect themselves is just mind-blowing to me. In fact, I've argued that had Mitch McConnell moved the HEROES Act like he should have done, that Trump would have won re-election in November without question.
We'll never know what would have happened had COVID not been around or had a relief bill, kind of come along. I mean, it definitely changed the whole calculus. I don't know. There's a couple of things that I'm still interested in around COVID for the early part of 2021. We're going to get at this vaccine. Here in New York, our governor is saying, don't expect enough people to be vaccinated to reach herd immunity before summertime. Right. So it's still a ways to go. Today, we had our first day of over 3,000 deaths in this country. What a horrific number. And we'll likely see that number continue. We'll see it happen again and again and again over the next several weeks. And there are going to be a lot of questions about not only economic relief, but vaccine justice. Who gets the vaccine and when? We don't have enough to go around, in the short term. So, who gets vaccinated? That will be a key question, especially once we get past the healthcare workers and the people living in assisted care facilities and long-term care facilities.
No, then it becomes the Hunger Games.
Yeah, there's a lot of questions to be asked there. And I'll tell you one thing I'm thinking about now, which I hope to come on here and talk about some other time, Rick, which is when this is all said and done, are we just going to let it go? Are we going to just all cheer and pat each other on the backs and say, well, thank God we're all vaccinated, let's move on? Or is there going to be any accountability? Look at where we're going to get to by the time this is over. 500,000 Americans dead, 600,000 Americans dead. It's, we need some real accountability. There should be a special committee. There should be a 9/11 style commission. There should be something that looks at the underlying issues and gets at what the hell went wrong here.
No, but sadly, as we've learned from the past, that stuff doesn't happen. And I have a lot of my listeners and a lot of friends who are saying, no, Joe Biden's attorney general is going to most certainly go and convict all the crimes and Trump isn't going to get away with it. They said the same thing, after Reagan left office. They said the same thing after H.W. Bush left office. We were going to go get those. After Bush left office, we were going to get all the people who lied us into a war. We just don't seem to do that as a country. We just go, okay, it's over. The pain has stopped. Let's get past it.
Well, I plan to work on it because I got to say, this strikes me as something we cannot let pass without some kind of redress. And there needs, I mean, remember the 9/11 Commission wrote that, I don't know, was it 1,000-page book that detailed its findings and talked about the failures in government and the different information sharing issues and all the different things that had to change in order to make sure that such an attack could never happen again. We need something like that. And I'm pretty sure it needs to touch on everything from healthcare policy on through to, the relationship between the states and the federal government, on through to economic relief and what we failed to do to allow people to, continue to live their lives and to feel some security despite the raging pandemic and unemployment. We've got to answer those questions. I mean, this is not an acceptable situation. The United States has failed in this regard, and we've got to look at why.
No, I agree with you. I agree with you on all those fronts, but I think the biggest part of it is the guy who was at top, the face of our government, Donald Trump, failed us from the beginning, and he's the reason we have this political divide based on a piece of cloth across your face. Had he come out right away and said, hey, look, we don't know what it is, but the general playbook says wear a mask, stay away from each other, wash your hands. Had he just come out and said, hey, let's do that until we figure this out. I'm calling on my patriots. I'm calling on my MAGA friends. Go out there and enforce it. This wouldn't have raged out of control like it has.
Absolutely. It should have been under control.
And how do you hold that accountable? How do you hold the people who showed up at state capitals across this country? How do you hold these business owners who literally have signs in their building saying we don't enforce masks, and other ones who mock you for wearing masks in their establishment? How do you deal with that?
Well, that kind of brings us back to that topic you raised a few minutes ago around social media and polarization. We've clearly got a problem there. We've got to address this issue. Why is everyone taking every argument to the extreme? Why are we identifying with these sort of crazy ideas? Facebook just in the last couple of days has done its best to try to remove a large number of groups, health groups that are spreading disinformation, anti-vaccine disinformation. But at this point, it's a drop in the bucket. You've got this diffuse network across social media that allows campaigns like Stop the Steal, like QAnon, like anti-vax information to spread. And the platforms can barely do anything to contain it. It's very, very difficult.
Yeah, but here's the thing, and this is where you go, you're never going to stop that. No matter what you have with social media, you're never going to keep up with the crazy. This is where having an educated populace who looks at this and goes, no, this is just insane. I mean, I watched some of the videos of so-called experts on masks and so-called experts on virus. They'll tell you they're experts. Failed high school biology, but they're experts. And some of the one thing I just saw the other day was talking about vibrations. It's because my voice doesn't have the right vibrations. I can't get COVID. What the hell is that?
I haven't heard that one. That's a new one. But the thing is that people are right now, unfortunately, attuned to conspiracy theories, attuned to narratives that explain circumstances that feel beyond their control. There's obviously an openness to sort of incitement and to very concerning ideas. And I think at root it comes back to this problem of inequality, and it comes back to trust in government. There's this sort of feeling that nobody's looking out for us at the top, and that corporations just want to make a dollar, and that the government is not there to satisfy the needs of the citizens, but some other constituency, a wealthy 1%. These are things we're going to have to address to make people trust each other again,
right,
and trust in institutions again,
right. And for me,
so that these alternatives aren't so attractive,
right. But for me, the idea, look, I don't like Facebook being as large as it is. I would be happy to see it broken back up into pieces where it should have never been allowed to acquire WhatsApp and Instagram and whatever else it's gobbled up to destroy competition. It should have never been able to do that. But ultimately, it's their algorithms that keep funneling us only things we agree with and keep pushing things at us. I remember at a time when I would have a whole bunch of different thought on my pages. Now it's very narrow, and it's more of, hey, here, what are you going to buy from us, as opposed to having those open discussions. If we're going to have them, we should have them openly. And look, if you say something stupid, a whole bunch of people will shout you down. That's democracy.
Well, there's definitely something wrong on the social platforms, we all know. And I guess, at this point, having seen these new lawsuits against Facebook, it looks like, I think 48 states joined this effort. And we'll see in the federal government. So we'll see what happens with this antitrust effort. It'll probably take years. Mark Zuckerberg told that to his staff today. So that, this is going to be a process that, takes years to unfold. But it is interesting. A lot of the cases, in part rely on emails from Mark Zuckerberg from years ago, where he quite blatantly said, our goal is to eat up the competition. It's to create these network effects that make us unassailable. And, it seems like it's time to address that. And maybe that is a part of the first step towards addressing some of the concentration of power and some of the problems on social media sites that we need to address.
Yeah, ultimately, it comes back down to the money, doesn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, think about how much money's coursing through these companies. It's absolutely obscene. I mean, it just billions and billions of dollars, and that's money that has left, in some cases, the news ecosystem, the journalism ecosystem. I grew up in a rural place in Virginia, and the news ecosystem there is struggling. There's very few journalists covering the community. Very little information about COVID or otherwise, and it makes it very hard for people to make decisions based on facts. So, maybe breaking up Facebook will somehow shake loose some resources that might flow back into news and quality information, into and even into good discussion like what you host, and we'll see a better outcome from that.
That is the hope. And like you said, it's probably going to take years because, look, ultimately Facebook has deep pockets and can draw this stuff out for probably as long as the government can continue after them. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. But Justin, I appreciate you taking some time for us. I appreciate the work that you guys do there at Protect the Results. Good stuff, man.
Thank you, Rick.
As always, our good friend Justin Hendricks. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Should Facebook go by the wayside? Should we break it up into little pieces so that the competition is there again? I'd love to hear it. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1953. That was the day that Ralph Cordiner, president of General Electric, issued his Cordiner Doctrine. It was the height of McCarthyism and the Second Red Scare. The House Un-American Activities Committee persisted in its witch hunting of trade unionists, labor militants, and alleged communists. It targeted many of the unions purged from the CIO in 1949. The United Electrical Workers was one of those unions. The UE had organized the electrical manufacturing industry, including General Electric. Wisconsin Senator Joe McCarthy and HUAC each began investigating UE Local 301 at the General Electric plant in Schenectady, New York. GE didn't like the militancy of the UE or the bad publicity McCarthy generated about the company harboring subversives. So President Cordiner issued a memo which stated that any employee called before a Senate or legislative committee hearing who invoked the Fifth Amendment in response to inquiries regarding alleged communist ties shall be terminated. When McCarthy came to Albany, New York to hold hearings on alleged subversive activities 3 months later, hundreds of UE members packed the room, booing and jeering the senator and cheering the defendants. One African-American worker demanded, "Why don't you investigate subversion by GE of the Jim Crow system, of the profits taken from the sweat of my people?" McCarthy abruptly ended the hearings, but 28 UE members would be fired at General Electric. Other electrical manufacturers like Westinghouse soon followed suit. It was a devastating blow to the union and to the fired members who had helped build the UE from the ground up. But the union persevered and remains a powerful representative force for workers in the industry today. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I gotta tell you, still, one of these things that, like I said earlier, I'm still shocked. I agree with the Republican senator from Texas, who has no idea how this is going to play out and why Texas would have anything to say with what's going on in Pennsylvania, Michigan, Georgia, or Wisconsin. And again, this is one of those things that's just kind of weird, but it's either the last ditch effort that maybe they think is possible, or it's, as I've been saying all along, this is about raising money. This is about list building and of course, bowing to dear leader. And here to share some thoughts on, the lawsuit filed by the Attorney General of Texas and 16 other attorneys general from across the country. I've asked Aaron Ford to come talk with us. He's the Nevada Attorney General. He's also the co-chair of the Democratic Attorney Generals Association. Aaron, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks, Rick. Great to be here.
So I'm looking at this, and I'm not an attorney. I don't pretend to be one, but I don't see what standing Texas has in what happens in my state of Pennsylvania.
Well, I think it's because they don't have standing. You have a good eye, with or without a law degree, on this issue, and I think you hit the nail on the head relative to that particular issue. I think that it's a last-ditch effort, whether it's a fundraising effort. It may also be something of concern, but at the very minimum, it's a lack of comedy. It demonstrates that the state of Texas and those 17 others who are signing on to this particular piece of litigation do not have respect for the voters in other states. And we won't stand for that, and nor should the rest of America.
Now, you're someone who has a trained eye. You're someone, this is your gig, to evaluate evidence and to decide if you're going to move forward in a court of law with the evidence that you have. Is there anything that you've seen from Rudy Giuliani and the tantrum tour that you would feel confident to take into a court of law?
Rick, I don't know how many lawsuits I've been involved in with the Trump administration as of now, or his surrogates. I've lost track. It's probably half a dozen or so that my office personally has been involved in. And each time they've come in with allegations, not evidence. That's why they've been laughed out of court, including last night when the Trump administration essentially sued the Biden administration, and our Nevada Supreme Court threw them out of court yet again. This is not evidence. It's easy for them to have these PR stunts. It's easy for them to get on television and spout out allegations from supposed whistleblowers and redacted affidavits. But when you get into court, you have to prove your case. They can't do it. I've seen it nowhere. Nowhere else in the other 53 or so lawsuits has evidence been shown to demonstrate widespread voter fraud affected this election. The people have spoken. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are our next administration, and I'm looking forward to January 20th at noon.
Yeah, but what does this say about these 17 states attorney generals that what's it say about them that, because I keep looking for a real statesman. I keep, I know that the right keeps saying that they're patriots and they love the country and they love the Constitution, and they've got all of these slogans and all of these talking points about how much they love the flag and all this stuff. I'm looking at this and going, this is, in my view, at this point, because you had your chance to go to all these states and be heard in all these states, this is beyond just poor sportsmanship and being a sore loser. This is borderline sedition.
Yeah, listen, I couldn't agree more, and I think it's important to note that the 4 states that they've sued are states that have Republican-run legislatures. And Nevada, for example, which has a Democratic-run legislature and has been under attack as these 4 other states, is not named in this lawsuit. And that's by design. They know that there's no way a Democratic-run legislature, for example, is going to kowtow to these types of requests. And so they are playing the end game. They're playing an end run around the votes of the citizenry in these particular locations, and they are kowtowing to the president. It's an unfortunate and undemocratic approach, and I'm confident that the Supreme Court is going to laugh them out of court as well.
Now, what's interesting is, our Senate Majority Leader here, the Republican Senate Majority Leader, because like as you pointed out, we have a Republican General Assembly. She said, and quite honestly, and I kind of give her credit for it, that if she didn't go along, they'd bomb her house. This is kind of this moment where we need patriots to step forward, even in the face of that kind of oppression from your constituents and your voters. Have you had those kind of events come at you? Have you had to deal with this kind of threat process?
My colleagues and I in the state of Nevada are quite familiar with those similar threats. We've not seen, thank goodness, the amount of vitriol coming at, for example, the governor in Michigan. But we have indeed had to step up our protection. We've had to ensure that we can have additional security, and we have been responding to, not when I say we, I don't mean just my office, I also mean our local law enforcement agencies, to threats. We are prosecuting someone right now who waged the threat against the governor under different circumstances, but nonetheless, this vitriol is existing, it's out there, and it is something that we all need to be cognizant of. And you're right, it takes patriots to, notwithstanding this nonsense, to stand up and to speak out. And I'm proud of, for example, our election workers and our elected secretaries of state, especially those who are of the same party as our president, who are standing up nonetheless and standing by the work of these elections workers.
Now, we're seeing the latest tactic being, these people, these radicals, I'm going to call them radicals, these MAGA hat wearing, costume wearing, gun toting crazies who go to elected officials' houses and surround their houses and scare their children in the middle of the night. This at some point has to stop. This is, in my view, it's unsafe. It's for me, it's borders on, it's terroristic threats. This is terrorist behavior. Is there any way from a legal standpoint to stop that kind of behavior?
Well, I think prosecution is one of the surefire ways of addressing this issue. And I think a lot of attorneys general across the nation, at least in some of these states that I've just named, are gearing up for exactly that type of prosecution. But it also takes, patriots, as you've indicated, speaking out against it and letting it be known that this is not acceptable and that it's high past time for the president and our fellow states and elected officials to stop misleading the public and stop feeding this and instead acquiesce to the will of the people. That will has been made known over the course of this last month and a week or so, and it's time for us to move on.
Yeah, I want to go back to the evidence that I had asked about because Rudy Giuliani and his clown car were here the day before Thanksgiving, and they had their little show where one of our state senators, Doug Mastriano, held his maskless of kangaroo court where no one was under oath, and there were tons of allegations, whether imagined, fantasized, or possibly somewhat close to reality. And then he ultimately went and was tested positive for COVID when he went to the White House that night. But we had this event here, tons of allegations, no information to our courts. They didn't bother bringing any of the things that they claimed during this hearing into the courts. And I keep asking, as an attorney, as someone who does this, are there any penalties for attorneys who knowingly bring frivolous lawsuits into court, especially like at the state Supreme Court level, like we've seen come out of the Trump team? Because, as you pointed out, and as we saw with our own eyes, tons of allegations in public, nothing, literally no evidence in court.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And your Attorney General, my good friend Josh Shapiro, has, I think, done a great job of defending against that nonsense in Pennsylvania courts. But to your question of whether there are penalties for frivolous lawsuits and lawsuits that ultimately are tossed out of court, just recently on Friday, in the Trump versus Biden lawsuit, my office wasn't involved in that, and kudos to the local firm of Wolf Rifkin and the national firm of Perkins Coie for doing this. But they defeated the Trump administration's lawyers, and the court required the Trump administration lawyers and the Trump administration to pay the costs for this particular piece of litigation. So those are some of the alternatives that are out there. There are what we call Rule 11 sanctions, things of that sort, that could also be pursued. I don't know how much that has happened in the 53 lawsuits that they've lost already, but absolutely there are consequences to the extent we're able to demonstrate the frivolousness of these lawsuits in court.
Because I look at like somebody like Rudy Giuliani, who at one point I assume was a respected lawyer. And to be honest, recently the only thing that I've heard probably come out of him that's been honest and true is he had a gas attack in Michigan. Something has to be done when you are what appears to be knowingly putting out propaganda and nonsense. There's got to be something. The Bar Association, something.
Yeah. Yeah, and in fact, I've heard conversation about bar associations actually looking into exactly that. But you again hit the nail on the head about Mr. Giuliani and others showing up in Pennsylvania in non-court settings, being able to spew nonsense and misinformation and allegations. And you use the word evidence, but I put that in quotes because that's not evidence. Evidence is what you can present in court that is going to be admissible and persuasive, and they have been unable to do that in any of the lawsuits, for example, that they've brought in Nevada. They've lost every single lawsuit in Nevada, and as I understand it, lost every single lawsuit in Pennsylvania, maybe with the exception of one. And at the end of the day, bar associations, courts, and others who can hold them responsible are looking into ways to do that.
Now, I want to take a look a second at, and I know you're not gonna talk against an attorney general like the guy in Texas, but this is a guy with some interesting backgrounds, and it's curious to me that now he decides to get in front of this. And there's been I've had some listeners who say, oh, he's just looking for a pardon, he's looking for something. This is just doing Trump's bidding. This isn't really him. And I don't know what his motives are, but it just seems mighty curious that this guy is, emerged into this position with the past that he's got and his current problems of being under investigation.
Yeah, you're right, Rick. I won't be speaking to the personal issues that the Texas Attorney General has currently. People can look that up and read for it on itself, But I think who said it best? The Georgia AG. And I'll quote him when he says, with all due respect, Texas Attorney General is constitutionally, legally, and factually wrong about Georgia, for example. And I would amend to that statement to say that he's also erroneous about Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. What his motivation is, I can't speak to. I believe that the intent is to continue sowing seeds of distrust and mistrust in the election process. But again, the integrity of our elections are intact. The people have spoken, and we have a president-elect and vice president-elect who I'm looking forward again to seeing inaugurated on January 20th at noon.
Yeah, I'm with you there. You listen to the Rick Smith Show. We're here with Aaron Ford. He's the Attorney General for the state of Nevada, also co-chair of the Democratic Attorneys General Association. Aaron, you look at what's going on and all the chaos and all this craziness. And I know on Thursday there's supposed to be, some stuff going before the Supreme Court. Walk me through how this process is going to work, so people kind of have an understanding of what the next steps are going to be. I guess Thursday's a big day in this, right?
Yeah. So generally speaking, the Supreme Court can have what they call original jurisdiction for lawsuits between states. Typically, I've seen that occur when you have water disputes. For example, Nevada and California over Lake Tahoe have been in litigation before the Supreme Court, or border disputes, and I believe some states on the East Coast have been engaged in litigation at the Supreme Court level there. Nothing of this sort have we seen, however, where one state, which has no business in sticking his or her its nose in the business of another's in terms of election processes, has sued at the highest court. But on Thursday, there are responses that are due from the four defending states, and those are going to be filed. My anticipation, my desire, my hope, and my belief is that the Supreme Court, after receiving these briefs, will determine that they will not accept Texas's plea to them for jurisdiction, and they will dismiss this lawsuit.
And do you think the Supreme Court has to come out with a statement of some sort, something for the good of the country? And I'm sure John Roberts doesn't want to get into the politics of all this, but at some point there's got to be a final arbiter to say, look, there's nothing here.
Look, Rick, I played sports a lot, and my children play sports, and we say you can win by 100, you can win by 1. I don't care if it's a one-word denial with the word denied. That's all we need from the Supreme Court, and they can have a sentence or a paragraph, but just give me the word denied, and we will be absolutely satisfied with that.
And that's the end of it then. Do you see any way forward to keep this going on and on and on? Because it seems like, look, as you pointed out, there have been like 53 losses. I mean, for a guy who said he was going to get tired of winning, at what point does he get tired of losing?
Listen, I will say this. We anticipate them continuing to fight at a minimum until January 20th. Who knows what he'll do beyond that? The truth is, this is part and parcel with the, as I call, run-of show of what several people in the Republican Party, and I don't say all, because you have a lot of Republicans who are actually sticking out against this nonsense, and you have a bipartisan voter protection program that has Democrats and Republicans alike working against these types of efforts. But the run of show for many has been to undermine the right to vote from the beginning to the end. They've made it hard to register to vote in certain jurisdictions. And if they can't stop you from registering, they've made it hard for you to actually vote. And if they can't stop you from voting, they make it hard for your vote to count. And if they can't stop your vote from counting, they try to throw your vote out. And if they can't throw your vote out, they try to keep a certification of an election based on those votes from taking place. And if they can't do that, then they try to get a state legislature to overturn the votes. And if they can't do that, then they claim that they're going to go beyond the safe harbor period to do something in Congress. And so on and on and on and on. It's par for the course for what they do. But unfortunately for them, those of us who are actual patriots, who believe in the democratic republic in which we live, will continue to defend against that type of nonsense, and we will prevail in court.
No, you're right there. And if they don't if they get through all of that stuff, then it gets to the whining and complaining and the bullying that I've seen from some right-wing bloviators about, we're going to do everything to make sure that Donald Trump is still president, everything. And I would like them to define what everything is. But I assume that, they're going to, throw a tantrum in the middle of the street. But I'd like to know what everything is.
I'm with you.
Crazy, crazy times. Aaron, I appreciate you taking time for us. Keep up the great work. Keep up being a patriot and keep it up. I appreciate it.
Rick, thanks so much.
Good stuff. Aaron Ford, Nevada's Attorney General, also co-chair of the Democratic Attorneys General Association. And look, as I've said, the reality here is there's nothing there. This is the bizarre part in all this. If there was a shred, and I've had people send me stuff and say, see, here it is. This is undeniable proof. And you go, exactly what is it that I'm supposed to be seeing here? Well, there were ballots, and they were in the room, and they were in boxes. And, okay. And, well, Rudy said. And nothing. Now, look, if we want to have a real conversation about, are there some problems? Yeah, there are. There always are. There are always going to be. But this idea that there was some grand conspiracy and Joe Biden learned coding while in the basement and figured out how to stuff ballots while he was in the basement, I'm not going there with you. But I appreciate Attorney General Ford coming on and talking with us. Going to take a quick break. Right back. Stick around.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1869. That was the day a new union named the Noble and Holy Order of the Knights of Labor was founded. It started in Philadelphia as a secret society of tailors, but soon the Knights expanded to workers in other trades. The Knights' unions were vertically organized. This meant each union included all workers in a given industry, regardless of craft. This was a different philosophy from most unionism of the time, which focused on craft-based organizing. The Knights also accepted workers of all skill levels as well as women. African Americans were also accepted after 1883, although often in segregated locals. The most well-known Knights leader, Terence Powderly, took office in 1879. By 1886, the group had grown to more than 700,000 members. The Knights championed the cause of the 8-hour day. While the union supported boycotts and arbitration, it remained very weary of strikes as a tactic. The Knights did support the Chicago General Strike for the 8-hour day that started on May 1st, 1886. After the bomb incident at the rally in Haymarket Square, the Knights were unfairly singled out for blame. Due to the backlash over Haymarket, the Knights' membership suddenly and dramatically declined. The widespread repression of labor unions in the 1880s led to the union's demise. The newly emerging American Federation of Labor replaced the Knights of Labor at the head of the labor union movement. The AFL focused on organizing by craft as opposed to industry. But the Knights of Labor had helped to show that inclusive unionism was possible.
Labor must reap what labor does sow. Labor must reap what
Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
The U.S. Department of Agriculture. What is it, and why does it matter? Created in 1862 by Abraham Lincoln to be what he called the People's Department, today this little-known agency has enormous tools and resources to restore fairness and opportunity across America's countryside. It has major anti-monopoly authority, controls huge rural development and housing programs, runs food stamps, school lunch, and other nutrition programs, has responsibility for pesticide regulations, directs the Forest Service and numerous other environmental programs, has sweeping civil and labor rights responsibilities, wields a $151 billion annual budget, has 100,000 employees, and an office in every county in America. And, most powerfully, the Secretary has broad authority to be a national advocate for the people against the corporate plutocracy now controlling policy. Ag Secretary is a big office, but tools only work if you use them. President-elect Biden rightly promised to restore trust that our national government will serve the public interest rather than continuing policies that abet oligarchic power and increase inequality. Here is a clear test of that promise. Instead of recycling another old-line agribusiness acolyte into USDA, Biden must be pushed to make a progressive choice for Secretary of Agriculture, someone unencumbered by financial or political ties to the status quo, willing to practice what Representative John Lewis called getting into good trouble, necessary trouble. This is Jim Hightower saying, at minimum, the next Secretary of Agriculture should pledge to rally family farmers, workers, consumers, rural communities, and urban neighborhoods in a common effort to break the corporate stranglehold and turn USDA into the People's Department again.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to. For information, visit hightowerlowdown.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
I remember the good old days when I actually knew a guy who was on the school board of the school I went to because, his kid was a friend of mine. We actually knew the people on the school board because they were integral parts of the community. They were people that we knew. And they cared about public education, which is kind of weird. But I know that was a whole long time ago when, it was, it was simpler, I guess, back then. Now what we've got is we've got a public education system under attack from every direction. We've got big moneyed interest, billionaire class, think tanks and front groups funding these candidates who are now running for school board, whose only concern is how do we slash programs, save money, and privatize. And here to share some thoughts on the last election of school boards around the country, I've asked Tom Unican to come talk with us. Tom has written the most recent piece, School Board Elections 2020, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Tom, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, Rick, how are you?
I'm good. I got to be honest. I read your piece, and it makes me sad for the loss of the old days, where you didn't need a billionaire to run for school board.
I just read a piece today by a guy that was on the school board in Oakland in 1997 through 2000, and he ran for his whole campaign budget total was $12,000. You couldn't compete at all today with that kind of money.
Yeah, and the thing that gets me is, we talk about the presidential races, which have just gotten so far out of control. And, if you want to run a competitive Senate race, it's like $5 million. You want to run a House race, it's like $1 million. If you want to run a state House race, it's $100,000 plus minimum. Average everyday working people can't get anywhere near that. And then you end up begging these billionaires and these very wealthy people for the resources that you need. And ultimately, I don't care whether you believe you're bought and paid for or not, you owe somebody.
Well, the thing is they're not going to listen to you unless you show them that you're ready to play ball going in. And in Oakland, it's an interesting case study. If you look at what went on in Oakland, it kind of gives you a little bit of hope. In Oakland, Jerry Brown really led the takeover in Oakland that opened the door for this kind of billionaire money coming in there. It's the big blind spot in Jerry Brown's political career was his love for privatizing public education. But in this last election, Michael Bloomberg spent $700,000 on Oakland. There was 4 seats up for sale. So for just Michael Bloomberg spent almost $200,000 a seat. And then Stacy Schusterman, the billionaire from Oklahoma, put in another 6-figure sum. And Arthur Rock, a billionaire from San Francisco, threw in some money. So you're talking about serious, like $1 million on 4 school board seats just from 3 billionaires.
Yeah, but here's my question, Tom. Why does somebody in Oklahoma care what happens in Oakland? Why does someone in New York, all the way across the other side of the country, care about what happens in Oakland? Why not spend money to make New York better instead of worrying about Oakland?
Well, I think Oakland's kind of the petri dish. They were trying to privatize Oakland, and so they would have an example in California. And the problem is that in Oakland, what's happened, though, in this last election is they actually lost 3 of the 4 seats. They spent all that money. They outspent their opponents 10-1, but the opponents won 3 of the 4 seats. So, and things are being turned around. When you in Oakland, they've had a real community campaign going on for a decade, fighting these people, and they were losing for a long time. But now they're starting to win regularly. Right now, the Oakland School Board is solidly pro-public school. And that's the first time in a long time, ever since the state of California, in a real bogus move, took them over in 2003. This is the first time that the Oakland community has had control of their schools.
Yeah, this seems to be something that happens in a lot of our larger cities. I mean, Philadelphia went through this as well, where the state had taken over the school board and taken local control away. And ultimately, you end up with a worse scenario. And then, the magic bullets start coming out. We've got cyber charters and charter schools, and all these other quick fixes that never work. But hey, they look nice on paper.
Well, the whole point of those schools, those like cyber charters and this personalized learning agenda, and charter schools themselves, and vouchers and neo-vouchers, all of this thing. I believe the fundamental point is that the wealthy class wants to lower taxes and wants to spend less on education, so that they can privatize it, they can increase class sizes, and they can decrease the professionalism of the teaching class, so they'll be less expensive. And it really, it's teachers that cost so much money in education. So if we can do something about getting rid of teachers, which that's why you want to own the school boards, then you can privatize them, then you can drive taxes down.
Yeah, but that seems counterintuitive. I mean, it's the business owners, it's these wealthy people who own these big businesses who keep whining that they can't find qualified applicants to make money off of, to make their companies profitable. It seems to me like they would want to spend as much money on the front end to educate people, to have an educated workforce, so that they could then go and, reap the benefits of that education by underpaying them in a different way.
Well, their kids are going to get a good education at a very expensive private school. And what they want for the regular Joe Schmo out here on the street is they want them to get something called badges. And they achieve these skill badges through some kind of a cyber program. And once they get the skill badges, then they can go to work in a job at, say, Amazon or somewhere that has a need for people that have finished that particular skill. They don't want to really give them a whole rounded liberal arts education. They just want to train them for jobs.
Yeah, like the old George Carlin quote, they want people just smart enough to push the buttons and shuffle the papers, but not smart enough to realize how bad they're getting screwed over. And I get that. And look, Amazon to me is the new coal mine, the new sweatshop factory from people that I talk to. That's it right in front of us.
Oh, there's a huge problem when you allow a monopoly like this to come around. Jeff Bezos is now by far the richest man in the world. It's just amazing, and they're pretty much own commerce in America.
That's crazy. Now, Oakland is an example of the good. People rising up, people seeing a value in public education, defending it. That's a great thing. What's the bad?
Well, the bad is Los Angeles. In Los Angeles, in 2017, the billionaires spent the most ever spent on a public school election anywhere. Was the total spending in the election was for 3 seats was $17 million. Well, that $17 million bought them control of the LA school board. Then one of the guys that they supported into that, Ref Rodriguez, was charged with malfeasance of campaign money, and so he ended up having to resign in 2018. He stuck around just long enough to vote for Eli Broad's business partner, Butner, to become the superintendent of schools in L.A., and then he resigned. Well, he was replaced by this Jackie Goldberg, and Jackie Goldberg, when she came on, that gave the school board a 4-3 public school tilt. But then this year, all 4 of the pro-public school seats were up for election. And so 2 of them, Jackie Goldberg and the other one, I forget his name, won the election in the primary. And then the other 2 were had to go to the general election and in the general election, it got really dirty, and the spending was just amazing. A guy named Scott Schmerelson had something close to $4 million in independent expenditures thrown at him, and the other one, Patricia Castellanos, had almost $7 million spent against her in just independent expenditure money. Well, this campaign, Scott Schmerelson hung on. He was the incumbent. He still won the election by like 53% of the vote, and it was a real teachers going out and really campaigning for him is what saved him. But Castellanos she was just a person running for the first time for school board. She had solid backing going in, but she couldn't deal with that having $6-7 million. So now the billionaire class basically has the majority on the LA Union School Board. So I called that the bad.
Yeah. So ultimately, they spend their way to control that school board as well. And these are school board seats, right? I mean, how much? I look at LA. How much money are we talking about that they can bilk off of the LA school district, and how little education are they doling out?
It's multiple billions. It's well into 10 figures, if not 12.
So there is a return on this investment then.
Oh, the big return is that they really want to privatize these school systems, and this is they're pushing all across America. It's not just L.A. or just Oakland. They're trying to knock off things one at a time,
right?
And they're doing a pretty good job of it. However, they've got a big problem. They only have a 1-seat majority in L.A., even though they've spent over $20 million in the last 2 elections, and they have 3 of their seats are up for election this coming in 2022. So they're going to have to defend 3 seats in the next election.
So they're probably going to have to rob and steal between. They got time to rob and steal between now and then. And if that is just the bad, finally, what's the ugly?
Oh, Indianapolis, hands down. Indianapolis is they've been attacked by privatization forces since the late 90s. Bart Peterson, a Democrat, was mayor of Indianapolis, and he is just Mr. Privatized Public Schools. And so he had a guy on his staff that he and that guy, I forgot his name off the top of my head, started the Mind Trust. David Harris was his name. They started something called the Mind Trust in about 2005. And the Mind Trust is basically a political organization working to privatize public schools in Indianapolis. Well, the Mind Trust has really been successful. And they have so much money. One endowment, the Lilly Endowment, has given them $22 million in just the last 7 years. And they're getting a lot of money from Gates, from the Walton family, from all sorts of, from the city fund. They're really well financed, and they're the political spear in Indianapolis, working to privatize. So just read what the PBS station in Indianapolis said about the election. Reform candidates sweep IPS school board race in inexpensive, continued campaign. The four winners in the Indianapolis Public School Board of Commissioners election will tilt the board firmly into support for the charter-friendly reforms ongoing at the state's largest school district. And I looked at that school district really closely a few months ago, and right now, Indianapolis is about 60% privatized. The school board only has control over 40% of the schools in Indianapolis.
And that is the plan to go all across the country. The moneyed interests want control of education. And as you pointed out, like George Carlin said, they want people just smart enough to run the machines and shuffle the papers, but not smart enough to realize that they're being screwed over and their democracy is being stolen from them. Sad stuff. I'm frustrated. I'm angry with the whole situation. And the only thing we can do is, well, next time your school board election comes up, vote the moneyed interest out. That's all I can think of. But Tom, I appreciate the time. Good piece. I hope folks will take a look at it. We'll get it out, the good, the bad, and the ugly, written by Tom Ulitkin. Tom, thanks so much, man.
Thank you, Rick. Nice talking.
Good stuff. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1958. That was the day 12 ultra-conservatives, including Robert Welch, Fred Koch, and Harry Lynn Bradley, gathered in Indianapolis to found the John Birch Society. These men saw cabals and communist conspiracies everywhere. They mobilized their vast financial resources to fuel Cold War paranoia. They opposed New Deal policies, the Civil Rights Movement, Lyndon Johnson's Great Society programs, and the Equal Rights Amendment. They funded Barry Goldwater's presidential bid in 1964, denounced Richard Nixon as a fake, and warned of his establishment of diplomatic ties with China. The Birchers also opposed water fluoridation, the Environmental Protection Agency, and the Occupational Safety and Health Administration. They pressed for the U.S. to withdraw from the United Nations and viewed the U.S. war in Vietnam as a plot to bring communism to the United States. Welch, a candy manufacturer, even asserted that President Dwight David Eisenhower was simply a tool for the communists and an advocate of a one world new order. More recently, many Birchers have also helped to found and fund the National Right to Work Committee, whose legal defense arm has pushed hard for anti-union legislation. Prominent members like the Koch brothers have funneled millions into the National Right to Work Committee in order to bust unions, kill the Employee Free Choice Act, and weaken the regulatory authority of the National Labor Relations Board. Their current headquarters are in Appleton, Wisconsin, hometown of Red Scare warrior Senator Joseph McCarthy.
Well, I run down most hurriedly and joined the John Birch Society. Got me a secret membership card, started walking off down the road. Oh boy, I'm a real John Bircher now. Look out, you
Labor History at 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I've been having this interesting back and forth with one of my Twitter folks, and there's this view, and look, I believe American entrepreneurial spirit is alive and well. I believe we can compete in a world of a global economy. I believe that our research and development is good or superior to many other countries. I believe we can compete when you're on a level playing field. And this is the part where everything starts to break down for me. I've talked for years about how China is cheating at every turn. I've talked about how they manipulate their currency to lower the value of their currency, which makes our exports much more expensive and their imports much more less expensive. So even here, competing for products on the shelf in your local store, their ability to manipulate the currency makes their products cheaper, and a store is going to choose this cheaper product because they want you to buy it. Because they want that turnover. And the American consumer wants a basket full of crap that they can pay as little for as possible. And if that means it's all Chinese made, then that's what it means. And you've got American companies who are, just and have been for decades now, just all, tingly in the panties about running to China so they can exploit their labor, exploit their lack of environmental regulations, and of course fill their coffers. Because they get to charge you the same prices that they were charging you before when they made it here. But when they took production overseas and cut their costs, in half, they pocketed that difference. So understand, our problem with China is a massive problem, which is why outgoing National Intelligence Director John Ratcliffe, whom I am not a huge fan, he's a Trump appointee, someone I view with a jaundiced eye because of that. But here again, the blind squirrel finds a nut. In a recent op-ed in the Wall Street Journal, he points out that, and rightly so, that many of Chinese major public initiatives and prominent companies offer only a layer of camouflage to the activities of the Chinese Communist Party. He also says that he calls the approach that China is taking economic espionage. Rob, replicate, and replace. He says China robs U.S. companies of their intellectual property, replicates the technology, and then replaces the U.S. firm in the global marketplace. And right here. And we have seen that happen time and time again with product after product. And what's interesting to me is this person that I'm having this back and forth with doesn't understand this or doesn't want to see the reality that has been the last 20 years of our trade policy. There's this view that, we can't manufacture in the U.S. because, those union workers, they want too much money. But we were able to when I was a kid. Somehow, miraculously, we were able to have jobs in the U.S. that paid good wages, and kids still had toys. Figure that one out. We still had things that were made here around us. And, I remember when I was a kid, every toy I had was made either in Massachusetts or Chicago or Vermont or Dayton, Ohio. I remember some of the toys there. And occasionally you would come across something made in Taiwan. And it was like, wow, this is something from Taiwan. It's now, when I find something made in the U.S., I'm like, holy wow, we better grab this. It may not be here long. And it's because of our insane trade policies. It's because we've allowed U.S. firms to abandon the U.S. and we've given them tax breaks to do it. And it's because they're dumb enough to allow the Chinese to steal their intellectual property. And I've said for years, I don't care if they get their intellectual property stolen. If you went to China, you partnered with a Chinese firm, and they robbed you blind, you deserved it. But at some point, you've got to take China on and hold them to the same rules as everyone else. Kind of like playing chess. I think I can beat anyone at chess. I don't care how good you think you are. I think I can beat anyone at a game of chess if I get to have all of my pieces and I steal your entire back row. I take the queen, I take the knights, I take the bishops, I take the rooks, leave you with the queen, the king, and the pawns. I think I can beat anyone. And this is what we're seeing coming out of China. They are at every turn manipulating all of the rules, the currency, stealing the technology, and targeting industry and heavily subsidizing to where they're selling product cheaper than people can buy the raw material to produce the product. And this is the scary part of where we're heading into. Because China has had this 2025 plan out now for 5 years. And they're not simply going to go after the plastic injection molds or the crappy toys that has no one working on them, or the dirty manufacturing stuff. That's not where they see their future. They want information technology. They want to be the world's big tech. They want to dominate the high-end, machine tools and robots. They want robotics to be theirs. Aerospace equipment. They want to dominate the aerospace. They want Boeing, Airbus. They're done if the Chinese get their way. They want high-end rail transport. Good luck finding an American-made transit car here made in the U.S. by a U.S. firm, because there are two here still. They're both owned by Chinese companies. And Bombardier, the company from Canada, they're under attack as well. They also want to dominate the energy saving market, the new technology and energy and electric cars. They want to dominate the jobs of the next generation. And I've had people say, well, they can have that dirty old stuff. We've moved on. We're better than that. And the reality is we're not. The reason we're having the political spasms that we have right now, like it or not, is because we have had an economy that has failed far too many people. Ask any of these Trump supporters why they're angry. They're angry because life ain't turned out the way they believed it was going to. Most of them are struggling to make ends meet. Most of them are worried, like all of us are, about how they're going to be able to afford health care or retirement. That American dream they were sold, it was more like a nap. And China is looking at recreating what we did 100 years ago. Building a prosperous middle class, building on an export model to make sure that they are able to support their citizens. And what's interesting to me is I get pushback from people when I say I'm a supporter of domestic production and domestic consumption. I've always said that, and I still believe it. You produce the things that you need, and those things that you cannot produce, you trade for. We're not engaging in free trade. Sorry, that's not happening. We're simply buying things that used to be made here that are now made somewhere else. And we're calling that competition. We're calling the reason that it moved competition, when reality is It was greed. All along, it was greed. And we haven't had elected officials until Trump. And look, I give Trump credit for pointing out the problem. I think he boogered it up and botched it badly. Because while I'm a supporter of tariffs, and I am, it's not the only club in the bag. You have to have the rest of the world who is worried about the same things that we are competing with a country that is going to cheat at every turn and has these mercantilist views of the world and how they're going to dominate the globe. You need to have a united front with all of your allies. Trump didn't do anything even close to that. In fact, what he did do was alienate the people who are our allies and buddy up to the countries that really hate us, while simultaneously inflaming the situation with the Chinese. Understand, they are going to be a military power very soon on par with us. And why is that? Because they're stealing our technology at an alarming rate. But I know, we can't believe that. The sad reality is we're losing this war. A war that we don't even know most of us don't even know we're fighting. Sad, sad stuff. Gonna take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You listen to The Rick Smith Show.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
All policymakers who prioritise mitigating climate risks should see these records as warning bells.
November 2020 was the hottest November ever recorded globally. Trump EPA rejects tougher standards on deadly soot despite link to COVID deaths. Denmark sets a deadline for ending fossil fuel extraction. Plus,
we have this chemical soup that washes into these creeks in the fall when it rains.
Scientists discover pollution from car tires is killing salmon.
All of those skid marks and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comments.
But I'll admit, after the way 2020 has gone, I myself have wondered if the world is even worth saving.
I'm with you, sister. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, 2020 has broken a lot of records when it comes to, well, certainly to storms, but also to heat this year.
Oh, yes, indeed. November 2020 was the hottest November ever recorded globally since record-keeping began in the 1880s. That's according to the European Union's climate monitoring service, Copernicus.
What do they know?
NASA and NOAA are expected to reach similar conclusions in coming weeks.
Copycats.
The new November 2020 record breaks the previous November record set in 2016. 2020 is now on track to be one of the top 2 hottest years ever recorded, and that is despite a cooling La Nina weather pattern in the Pacific Ocean. And that, climate scientists say, indicates that the relentless pace of man-made global warming is overwhelming the possible effects of cooler ocean temperatures.
I am starting to notice a pattern here. We should keep studying this for another 20 or 30 years. Maybe we'll figure it out.
Meanwhile, the Trump administration is racing the red light to ensure pollution is as bad as possible before they're forced out of office.
As deadly as possible.
On Monday, the Trump Environmental Protection Agency rejected setting tougher standards on deadly soot. That's microscopic particles of air pollution. And that was despite scientific evidence showing that soot contributes to the premature deaths of nearly 50,000 Americans every year.
Scientific evidence from the administration's own scientists.
Health experts say the failure to curb soot pollution is especially deadly right now because growing scientific evidence shows that long-term exposure to air pollution, which already disproportionately affects communities of color and low-income communities, is linked to higher death rates from COVID-19.
Oh, well, if it's killing people with COVID-19, obviously they don't care about those people.
The Biden administration can restore many clean air and public health standards that the Trump administration has rolled back, but that process will take time, and meanwhile, more Americans may die prematurely from air pollution. However, Georgia voters have the power to save lives in the U.S. Senate runoff elections on January 5th, because if Democrats win majorities in both houses of Congress, then they can repeal these last-minute rules.
And not a moment too soon.
But there is a source of pollution that's going to be a lot harder to reduce. A new study has found that car tires are the culprit behind the mysterious deaths of coho salmon in creeks around Puget Sound in Washington state. It took scientists 20 years to find the culprit, a chemical soup from roadways that washes into creeks when it rains, contains bits of worn car tires that chemically react to contaminate the water and in turn kill the coho.
Wow.
University of Washington scientist Ed Collegier explains.
The chemical that seems to be really problematic and toxic to these fish is actually a preservative for tires. I hope we can get to a point where we have tires that are safe for not just humans driving on them, but also the fish and the organisms that are exposed to roadway runoff.
Meanwhile, as you gear up for the holidays, new studies have shown that glitter is a source of pollution. The tiny pieces can wash into the environment, harming wildlife. 3 major retailers in the UK have announced they are eliminating glitter from their branded Christmas merchandise this year because it sticks around a long time after the sparkle has gone and is mistaken as food by fish and birds.
Glitter?
Glitter.
Really?
Really?
Is there nothing you cannot ruin, Desi Doyen?
Finally, some major good news. In a landmark decision, Denmark has become the first major oil producer to set a deadline to end extraction of fossil fuels in its territory. Denmark is the top oil producer in the European Union. They announced they will stop issuing licenses for new oil and gas drilling in the North Sea and will set existing production to expire no later than 2050. Environmental groups noted that 2050 is way too late to end production of oil and gas to curb man-made global warming, but they called the decision a watershed moment and a major shift for a country to keep its fossil fuels in the ground.
Yeah, let's celebrate. Break out the glitter. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find, follow, and share us planet-wide on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, news today broke. President-elect Joe Biden is expected to name Catherine Tai as the U.S. trade representative, and I got to be honest, someone that I'm not familiar with. This name came out of left field for me. I guess from what I'm reading, she is the chief trade lawyer for the U.S. House Ways and Means Committee. She will be the first Asian American, I guess, to serve in this position, and the first woman of color to serve as the U.S. trade representative. I'm sure we'll learn more in the coming days. From what I've read, she's prosecuted numerous cases on trade with China and their practices at the WTO. I'm sure we'll find out more in the coming days, but here to share some thoughts on maybe what we'll find out, I've asked our good friend Bob Ney, former congressman and political analyst, to come share some thoughts. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Well, thank you, Rick.
So, any idea of this choice?
Well, if you look at her history, which is interesting. First of all, she's very capable. She hails from I think it's Connecticut, but she grew up in Washington D.C. But she was, on the Ways and Means Committee, as you had mentioned, and she also was well known on the Hill because I didn't know her, and I actually called somebody today that's pretty familiar with Ways and Means up on the Hill, and what they had said about her is that she definitely promotes strong labor provisions, and she, by the way, had a big-time role in negotiating with the Trump administration regarding the new NAFTA. So she had a role from the House over, and also they say that she's quite with the mechanics pragmatic about what she does on trade policies. I think overall, pretty balanced. And again, the thing that I was told up on Capitol Hill, by friends today was that she does advocate for labor. So
and that's a good thing.
I think it's a great start. Yeah.
No, I like I said, I knew you'd probably know because I hadn't heard of her. But that sounds good to me because here's the thing: we've got some serious problems with China. As I said earlier, the outgoing director of national intelligence, John Radcliffe, is saying, "Look, this is our greatest threat." And he calls what the Chinese are doing economic espionage, where they rob, replicate, and replace U.S. firms. And we need somebody who's going to be strong on enforcing our trade policies.
Oh, for sure. And like I said, I didn't know her. She was up on the Hill after I left, but I called today, and I called a Republican staffer who said, "I know what you're going to ask." When I asked it, how is she on trade, and they said she's good. So, I think she's, at least seems on paper, and from what I hear, going to be pretty decent.
I don't know that it's a ringing endorsement. You said you talked to a Republican staffer on trade. I'm a little worried now.
Well, no, you got to understand, they know where I come from.
Oh, okay.
That's why they're laughing. They go, "We know what you're going to ask."
No, because I've been having this back and forth with people over my support of tariffs and this belief that we can compete with China, and I keep saying there's no way you can compete with communist China. No matter what you call their economic system, you cannot compete with a country that is going to cheat at every turn, going to shake your hand, look you in the eye, and stab you in the back at every opportunity. You cannot compete. No matter how hard you try, no matter how smart you are, you're not going to compete.
Well, what I said up on the Hill when I was there for 11 years is you cannot compete with slave labor. And I used to tell people, if I hear one more time about how we need to be more productive, we cannot be more productive against the average Chinese woman who makes 37 cents an hour and is so worn out by the age of 28, forced retired. We won't compete against something like that. So if it's ever a matter of we need to be more productive, which I heard 100 times, that's nonsense. And then the other thing, and I would hear this from, because there were 49 of us or 50 of us Republicans that supported, labor on trade bills. But most of the Republicans just thought trade bills were fantastic. And I remember David Dreyer from California came to me and said, "Well, we need this bill." And I said, "Why?" "Boeing's losing jobs." I said, "Well, that's because you had trade bills. Now you need another trade bill because they're losing jobs. Then you'll need another one." I mean, you couldn't convince them that we had to, at some point in time, do something. And then, of course, the unholy alliance of Gingrich and Clinton, which I called the unholy alliance, which did the permanent trade status, which gave China everything they wanted.
Yep.
Now, President Clinton personally had told me that he would be able to change their behavior with this. I'm not saying he didn't believe that,
No, and that's the problem. He did believe it, and he was wrong.
Right. Right.
But like you, I was screaming in a different arena that it was a bad idea, and I've been against it from the beginning. And what's happened over those 20 years, and you just stop and think about it. It's just been 20 years. And look how much they've taken from us.
Sure. And the other thing, too, it's not a matter of being protectionist. If you look at histories, you and I could do an entire show on real-life case examples of where the Chinese manipulate and torture our businesses. They really do when a product comes into their country, but had no problem to ship what they wanted here, including lead-based paint toys.
Yeah.
We don't want to forget that one.
And baby formula with melamine.
Right, and dog food, and that killed animals.
Yeah, all kinds
Sure.
of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But there's still, and I'm trying to take this moment because my fear is that just because Donald Trump put tariffs on the Chinese and said, hey, we've got to do something with this, that there are going to be a large segment of people who go, no, we've got to do just the opposite.
Oh, I know.
And on this issue, there's a lot of issues I agree with that on, but on this issue, the blind squirrel found a nut.
Right, and Joe Biden has said he's keeping tariffs for the moment, for the time being, which I thought was a wonderful.
Yep.
He didn't try to throw out an olive branch. Well, I'm going to consider removing. No, he's going to keep them right now. I thought that was a great strategy.
No, and this was a guy, and look, during the primaries, I didn't vote for Biden in the primary specifically because when asked about China, he said China wasn't a problem.
Right. Oh, yes, he started out on a really rough road, on that issue, and I thought actually that Trump tried to beat him up on, but I thought Trump would go completely crazy on that issue.
Yeah,
I really did.
They missed that. I think that was a blind spot.
Right.
That they could have exploited. Instead, they went the other way and tried to go after Hunter Biden, who I now understand is under investigation for some kind of tax scenario. Any word on this?
No. The only thing that I was talking to somebody today that Trump must be furious because he's probably wondering why Barr didn't, quote, do something, and so now Barr, don't you think, might be part of the deep state conspiracy? What do you think? Huh?
What I want to know is where the laptops are. What happened to the laptops?
I don't know.
They were everywhere for a while, and now they're nowhere.
Rudy took them.
Rudy's got them.
Rudy,
and I guess it'll be interesting to see if Rudy's supposed to do a press conference or something Thursday. It'll be interesting to see if he does because, well, Rudy's got the COVID.
If he wears a mask.
Well, now he's not going to wear a mask ever now.
Right. Well, that's true.
Because, like Trump, he's now Superman.
Mm-hmm.
But on this tax evasion thing, or this tax, it's not evasion, I'm sorry, this tax, how did he put it? This tax affair. What do you think they're looking at?
I don't know. All I know is that they were focusing on, a tax case, and that's all I know about it. I don't really know much about it. I didn't read up much today.
I had someone say it was because he had some dealings with China and some of that, and they were hoping that that's where it was. That he wouldn't have, claimed something. And I'm going, if you have tax people who do your taxes, they're generally above boards. I mean, if you're in your basement at night, with TurboTax trying to figure out how to do this yourself, chances are you're going to screw it up. But if you hire a professional people to do this, chances are you're not going to screw it up too badly. Or am I off base?
Right. I mean, I don't know. It was kind of sketchy today. There was a statement released. And it was by Hunter Biden that said he just learned for the first time from his legal counsel they were looking at the tax affairs, and he said that he's confident that professional objective review will be demonstrated. He handled them appropriately, and again, he stated in this, which is interesting, leads to what you said, including with the benefit of professional tax advisors.
Right.
So he's got somebody that signed off on something for his taxes.
Yeah, I mean, if he's making $100 million a year off of the Ukrainians and $1 billion a year from the Chinese, he can afford to hire somebody over at H&R Block. No,
I would think. Right.
Oh, well, we'll see how this plays out. Also, Lindsey Graham says that he thinks that Donald Trump should show up to Biden's inauguration. What do you think?
Oh, absolutely. Look, there's been, let's see, is it 3 or 4 other presidents? It's slipping my mind. Maybe 3 others that did not show up. One of them because there was a death, and then one of them they were angry, and the other kind of a precedent. But as far as Trump goes, there is absolutely no doubt 2 things. 1, he should show up. 2, if he does not show up, he should not do anything as an alternative that day. Period. Anywhere in the country that day. But he should show up. This is the tradition. There's no reason not to, except he doesn't want to be recognized as, quote, the guy that lost up, on that platform. But this whole talk of doing something at the same time a rally, that just let me tell you something, Rick. A big Trump guy, and I'm not saying this is the rule, okay? But a guy who has supported Trump over and over and over from Florida called me about 2 hours ago, and he said he was completely, thoroughly disgusted, and he had it over what Trump's doing on the inauguration. And this guy was a dyed-in-the-wool, Trump person. And I think there's others out there like that. Maybe not everybody, but it's a tradition. He should do it. But again, if he doesn't, the last thing he should do is to have some alternative event.
Yeah, see, I fully expect him to have
be
some
a mockery.
Yeah, I see him having some, we really won, and I'm gonna, I'm gonna stake my claim kind of event, which, I don't put past them.
Well, no, they're talking about having something that would, quote, create a forced split screen, Trump at the same time and Biden at the same time. And that, I don't know where his mind is, that would not sell well, I guarantee you, across the board with Republicans. It just won't sell well.
Do you really think that? I mean, in this moment, I used to believe. See, I think that was conventional wisdom at one point, but because I'm looking at all of this stuff that's still going on. I mean, we've now got 17 states that are suing Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Georgia. Wow. Right. That have no business dealing with anything in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, or Georgia, but they're still doing it because dear leader wants them to, or whatever it is. I
thought that one was politically bizarre. I thought that they went, crossed way over the line. The Supreme Court's already spoken on Pennsylvania. To even do this is foolish. But I do think, Rick, though, when it comes to the inauguration, I think there's look, you've got different categories of people who supported Trump, different categories. And I think you have, at least 20 or 30% of the people that did that, maybe they didn't care for some of the stuff Trump did, but they didn't care for Biden or Harris or something of that nature. They weren't sure, and they went with Trump. But I still think maybe not 70% or 50%, but I still think about 30% of people, if you have to take a guess, that supported Trump will not be happy with this deal on the inauguration. I don't think they will. Now, you've got people that no matter what, they're going to say it's a great thing. But I think there are people out there that were kind of, they could vote either way and went with him and just are not going to be real pleased with this.
Because I keep waiting for that moment, Bob.
Mm-hmm. No, I'm talking about amongst people.
No, I keep waiting for that moment where people, do go, oh, no, this is abridged. This time he's gone too far.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I mean, like I said, I'm not saying that 50 people called it, but I have seen people. I've seen people on Facebook that supported Trump that have come out and said this isn't good. So I do think there's some people out there. I really do.
Well, I hope you're right.
It won't go well.
I hope the true patriots step forward, speak up, speak out, and put an end to this finally, because ultimately we've got to be moving forward. Because, I don't know if you know it, but 3,000 people died today because of the COVID virus. And we expect 3,000 more tomorrow and the day after and down the road. And all of this talk of overturning the election, all of this talk of getting state legislatures to set aside, people's votes, is overshadowing the fact that this thing's raging out of control.
Right. It's terrible. And again, I would assume that the Biden administration, no matter what, will bite their tongue and not get drawn into a second campaign within the first 90 days with Donald Trump.
And I guess the question is will Trump honor the traditions past of not going after Biden in the first 100 days?
No, oh no, I can answer that one. I'm just saying that Biden can't get sucked into the trap of starting a new administration and trying to answer all Donald Trump's statements.
Yeah.
He just can't do it.
Just got to keep your nose to the grindstone, move forward.
Right. Keep your mantra, keep going, keep moving the football down the field.
Yeah, do the one thing that Trump hates the most. Ignore him.
Exactly.
There you go. Bob, as always, I appreciate the time, my good friend.
Okay, thank you, Rick.
Good stuff. Our good friend Bob Ney. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Should Trump show up? And if you're Biden, should you let him? And is there a way for Biden to go, no, it's okay. Don't bother. Go have your other event. That I think I'd like to see. Quick break. Right back. Stick around.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1953. That was the day that Ralph Cordiner, president of General Electric, issued his Cordiner Doctrine. It was the height of McCarthyism and the Second Red Scare. The House Un-American Activities Committee persisted in its witch hunting of trade unionists, labor militants, and alleged communists. It targeted many of the unions purged from the CIO in 1949. The United Electrical Workers was one of those unions. The UE had organized the electrical manufacturing industry, including General Electric. Wisconsin Senator Joe McCarthy and HUAC each began investigating UE Local 301 at the General Electric plant in Schenectady, New York. GE didn't like the militancy of the UE or the bad publicity McCarthy generated about the company harboring subversives. So President Cordiner issued a memo which stated that any employee called before a Senate or legislative committee hearing who invoked the Fifth Amendment in response to inquiries regarding alleged communist ties shall be terminated. When McCarthy came to Albany, New York to hold hearings on alleged subversive activities 3 months later, hundreds of UE members packed the room, booing and jeering the senator and cheering the defendants. One African-American worker demanded, "Why don't you investigate subversion by GE of the Jim Crow system, of the profits taken from the sweat of my people?" McCarthy abruptly ended the hearings, but 28 UE members would be fired at General Electric. Other electrical manufacturers like Westinghouse soon followed suit. It was a devastating blow to the union and to the fired members who had helped build the UE from the ground up. But the union persevered and remains a powerful representative force for workers in the industry today. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So CNN's reporting that Melania Trump just wants to go home. She just wants to go home. And you know what? I want her to go home too. Go back to New York, take Donald with you, take the kid. I think I've only mentioned his name once or twice over the last 4 years. And I'll tell you, I give credit to folks on the left and to Democrats who did not at any point go after their teenage son. That not something you saw the right wing do to Chelsea Clinton or to the Obama girls, or maybe it's just that they love beating up on women. Not sure where that is, but I'll be happy to see them go home. I hope they go. I know there'll probably be a book. There'll probably be a Christmas book maybe. If you remember her bizarre tirade about how much she hates the blankety blank Christmas trees and all of that stuff. Maybe a kid's Christmas book. Maybe with a I don't care coat to go along with it. Remember, her legacy is not much better than Donald's. And it's interesting because the CNN story is saying that she's now, as of late, thinking about her legacy. And there might be a book. It won't be a memoir. But she's thinking about the legacy, which is why we're having a Christmas gala now. And there was the unveiling of the new tennis courts. Yeah, that's the legacy. Brand new tennis courts and a pavilion and all kinds of wonderful extravagances during a global pandemic. That is the perfect the perfect punctuation point on her quote-unquote legacy as First Lady. Didn't do much on the literacy front as some First Ladies have done, or the gardening front as Michelle Obama had done. No, her Be Better thing didn't work because, well, look who's in the Oval Office. So I don't know what the legacy would be. Maybe just a book of empty pages? I certainly do not know. But I'll tell you one thing. I will be happy on January 20th, 2021 at 12:01 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, as he is no longer the president of our United States. That'll be a good day. If you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast. The Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. As always, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much for being here. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.